Hello and welcome to week 7 in Psychology Seminar, where we are continuing our discussion about assessment, essentially the skills and how we're measuring them in the Associates of Science in Psychology program and where that lays. And we spent last week talking about the expectations of this program specific to the field of psychology as represented by the American Psychological Association's expectations for undergraduate learning in psychology. And the sort of general education expectations, what does it mean to have a college degree, that was outlined by the Association of American Colleges and Universities in the value outcomes. And we can see how those have been very specifically aligned with all the activities that you're asked to do within this program. We now look at a different set of outcomes coming from a different place. Now, there's going to be some crossover, particularly between these kinds of skills and what we view as the essential general education learning outcomes, but they come from a different source. Now, many researchers and organizations, what they did is they went out and they looked at business leaders across all sorts of industries, psychology, education, healthcare, business, and asked, what do you want your employees to be able to do? They're coming to your company, and they have the skills that are associated with their degree, be it psychology or nursing or line working or anything. But what do you need them to have in order to work in the modern workplace, to be successful? What do they need to present? What skill set do they need? And that research resulted in a list of skills associated with what employers are looking for in their new employees and existing employees. So what we're going to look at now is not so much something that I've delineated within the curriculum, but the curriculum does allow you to explore, develop, and identify these particular skills to see where you have deficits, where you have extreme skills, how do you want to portray those when you're applying for a job, both in your resume and your application and your interview. And so to kind of get you thinking about these areas that employers are looking for beyond your GPA, beyond your academic achievement, what are they looking for? And so those are referred to as 21st century skills, 21st century workplace skills. Often we might see it there too. And there's 3 sets of them, and we're going to review them really quickly. And then the point of this is for you to reflect. In the final assessment of this is a paper where I'm asking you to reflect on your particular skills and deficits in relation to each one of these, every single one. This is a good document to have to identify both what you're good at and what you want to emphasize when you're presenting yourself, but also where your deficits might be and your opportunity to look for opportunities, chances to develop those skills. So we start our exploration here looking at learning skills. And here we see some crossover, of course, with what we've already discussed. And we have critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication. This is wide-reaching. So we're looking here, critical thinking, the ability to take information in, put information from different sources to come in and critically evaluate not only the details of the facts and whatnot, but the sources in order to come to a logical conclusion. The ability to do that. Creativity, presented with a problem, and then you can come up with novel solutions, not the straightforward solutions. You come up with creative solutions, bringing in, thinking outside the box, basically what we're looking at. Collaboration, the ability to work with other people and have your performance dependent on the group's performance. This is a skill set. We do groups all the time, and they often fail because we have not developed the skill set associated with collaboration, helping each other to do the best job that they can because we're all going to benefit. This is counter to the individualistic culture that we have. In other more collective cultures, this is the norm, and they might have trouble individual accomplishment. Not everyone, obviously, but collaborating, being able to work well with others, either in a leadership position or a followership position. And the opportunities to develop those kinds of skills. And finally, communication in all of its ways. Communication orally, communication in terms of active listening skills, the ability to present information, the ability to create documents that accurately present communication. So this is where your writing skills are as well. They're also in terms of how do you communicate electronically? How good are you at making sure that your message is a good message that's going out, that it's appropriate? How do you manage those kinds of communication? And this extends right into your online identity, to the fact of how are you managing the public perception of you within social media, because it is almost guaranteed that if you apply for a job and the employers, they're not just looking for someone to push a button, they're looking for someone to put in charge of things. They're going to check out your social media. And so managing that is also part of this communication skill that we have. Now we move on to the next set here, and we're looking at literacy skills. Literacy. Now we got to talk about this term literacy. Literacy means a mastering of. Now we usually think about literacy and we use that term to describe the ability to read. So we have statistics on literacy. But it's not, it's a more generic term. It's an understanding and mastery of the tools associated with information and how to use those tools effectively. So when we look at this from the point of view of the degree, we look at information literacy. Now, information literacy is the ability to use critical thinking, to evaluate good sources of information, and understand the flaws, benefits, risks, pros, cons, however you want to do it, of a particular source of information. So we're looking at it, not just evaluating the content that we do in critical thinking, but evaluating the source. Where is this coming from? What is the motivation of the author? What is the motivation of the publisher? Is this slanted information? Where is the bias? The bias is there. Where is it? What is it? Is this capitalizing on is this particular source of information capitalizing on my own negativity bias, my own availability heuristics? Those are things we're covering in Intro to Psych right now. Understanding how information works and where it comes from. The second one we see here is media. Part and parcel with information, because most of our information is coming through the media. Understanding the purpose of media: to sell products, to sell ideas, to modify and change, define our culture, to express that, and there's diversity within that, and understanding where that rests in terms of you. We often see the media as an enemy. The media is a partner. Like it or not, media is a partner for you to be able to access information that you cannot have on a first-hand basis. But you have to use it intelligently. You have to understand where it's coming from. And even your favorite media sources, we get to that bias that we might have. We might have a bias toward particular sources because they're reinforcing schemas and understandings of the world that we already possess, and we have an emotional attachment to those. Part of professionalism is removing those emotional attachments so you can remain, at least to the best possible ability, objective in terms of how you consume media information. And finally, we look at technology itself, the actual utilization of technology, computers, cell phones, tablets, different operating systems, to be agnostic. I have my favorites. I use Apple products all the time. I can use a Windows computer. I've even used a Linux computer. I've used a Unix computer. I've used a mainframe. I have my preferences, but I've tried to make sure that I can understand and use all kinds of technology. And not only, but using software, using different software. How do you, just mastering that stuff. So, we see ads right now, must be good at Office. Holy cow, everybody has to be good at Office now. You have to be, it's almost like you should be able to operate a phone. it's one of those, why do we need to even ask that? That should be a skill that you've mastered, all aspects of your office software and other, maybe if you have an Apple computer, that you've mastered pages and numbers and Keynote, along with mastering Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. So mastering those software skills, developing good problem solving around software use, and where do you ask questions and where do you dig around and explore, and developing using Brightspace, using learning management systems like this, using video, how to upload videos onto the web, how to send messages in different media platforms, and how to see what those. It's just a mastery of technology, because we have to use it. And technology is progressing so quickly that it's very likely within the term of your employment that the technological aspects of your job are going to transform. They have in mind. There was no online anything at KVCC when I first started working at KVCC. And now everything is online. And I know it's 20 years, but still, huge changes along the way. So we have to master technology. And finally, the last set here, a larger set of particular skills, and that is life skills. These really have a bit to do with the kind of personality that you have. And we sometimes see intelligence and personality as hardwired. And we know that intelligence is not that way because we go to school and we develop techniques that make us smarter. And so we can do the same thing with our personality. So let's look at some of the things that these are employers. They're looking for flexibility. Not that you're going to give your life to the company. That's not what we're talking. We look flexibility. If your job changed, you're not a stick in the mud. If you have to learn a new piece of software, you're not complaining about it all the time. There's these go with the flow kind of thing. I mean, I would much rather, if I was an employer, I'd much rather hire someone who can move with the company and be flexible. That person will stay on, I'll rely on them, than someone who's going, no, this is all I know how to do, this is it. So developing a sense of flexibility, not only in your skill set, however, also in terms of your attitudes. When new information, again, we get back to that interconnected with critical thinking and information literacy, and we come down to when the changes in our society come on, you're going to be flexible. You're going to be able to move with that and keep on going. You're going to be able to adapt. In fact, when we talk about intelligence, we often talk about the adaptive quality of intelligence. It's not static. It's how can we respond creatively to different situations when under new circumstances. The next one, of course, is leadership. Now, I'm gonna draw a little bit of take a little soapbox on this. There's a difference between leadership and command. Now, command is the skills that you have as a supervisor and how you manage those skills and still develop a good team behind you. You have legitimate authority, and so command is a delicate balance between assuring that you're the person who's in charge of something, is seen as the person who's in charge of that, and that you can manage the behaviors of those underneath you to accomplish unified goals. So you see, command. Leadership happens all over the hierarchy. And it has to do with some of these other ones here, initiative and productivity and whatever, to be a leader in what you do, to be outspoken, to be an active part in the construction of whatever it is that you're doing is a representation of leadership. Now, there's people that won't do that, and there's people that do that, and sometimes those people are promoted, sometimes they're not. Sometimes your leadership can happen just in your own work. Sometimes it happens just within the work that you're doing with your immediate colleagues and whatnot. But to be a leader is not necessarily to be in charge. It's to be on the forefront of ideas, creativity, taking initiative, And they look for that. They don't look, there's only so many people that can be in command, but everybody can be in leadership. Everybody can bring their ideas, be active, be engaged in whatever they're doing, and express leadership. So try to see that leadership command difference. We can sometimes put them together, and certainly we want people who are in command to have leadership skills. We have probably all encountered people who didn't have leadership skills, yet they were in command. The other skills we're looking at related to this, we have initiative, taking initiative, not only in terms of your own activity, but being engaged in what's going on in the entire organization. Creativity comes in here, communication skills come in here, leadership, flexibility, all with initiative. I mean, initiative is when we look at this from a developmental point of view, it's one of the first stages in Erickson's theory of development. Initiative, it's I can come up with ideas and enact them in my world. I don't have to just be following like a robot. I can come up with things creatively, work within the hierarchy, work with leaders, work with colleagues in order to bring those to fruition. It's a very important skill. The next one is incredibly important, and that is productivity. You need to get things done. There is a physics idea that I like to present. The definition of work is force over distance. That's what we call work in the physics world. So force, like say you have a box and you're pushing the box. Now there's resistance to that from the friction and the weight of the box and gravity, but you have a vector going against that box, and the degree to which the box moves, we call that work. There has to be movement. There has to be something that happens. There can be all kinds of effort. So figuratively, if I'm pushing against a wall and it's not going anywhere, putting a lot of effort, but I'm not getting a lot of work done. There's no work being done because the wall's not moving. So the selective application of pressure, the selective application of effort, of force on a particular project has to result in that product moving forward, getting done. And I know as a supervisor of the part-time faculty that I have, that, and I suffer from this too, but trying to get something done is irrelevant in some context. The effort that you put in is sometimes irrelevant. In fact, it's often irrelevant. In some ways, I don't care necessarily how much you tried to get this done. The question is, did you get it done? Did you get it done correctly? Did it result in actual work? We sometimes have to evaluate how effective our efforts are in producing work. We have all spent hours and hours unproductively doing things, making effort that ultimately did not result in work being done. So this is a skill set to be able to identify, how do I, metacognition, thinking about how you approach problems. How am I going to approach this to get it done? How do I prioritize to get it done? And let's say this, I think we've done a poor job in actually teaching some aspects of time management because they run in the way of productivity. And let me explain that. Often we're told to schedule times to get work done. So let's say I'm approaching a project and I schedule 2 hours to get that done. Now the problem with that is not that I haven't, of course I want to set aside time and I want to make sure nothing interferes with that time so I can get to work on that thing. But what if 2 hours is not enough time to get it done? And it may be that you've experienced that sort of productivity thing. Like I scheduled time, I put the time in, and it didn't get done. Because scheduling the amount of time doesn't mean that you understand how long it's going to take. That comes with experience. So if you schedule a time and you're like, okay, this is the time I've blocked out kicked all the kids out, no television shows I want to watch, good quiet time at home, I'm going to get that paper done, and it wasn't enough time. You're going to feel very unproductive and very frustrated and whatnot. So productivity is both a function of time management and a development of the understanding of the time it takes to get things done. And the time it takes me to get something done is different than the time it takes for you to get something done. And this might even, when I talk about learning disabilities, they suck because of this. Learning disabilities are hard to deal with because for many people with learning disabilities, they have to schedule more time than people without learning disabilities. And that sucks. It does. That's what sucks about having a learning disability. And so productivity is not the amount of time. It's the amount of product. Productivity, not time activity. Ooh, I like that. Productivity, not time activity. So it's getting things done, and it's learning that balance, that prioritization. You might get to the end of that 2-hour time. The kids are now back, and you say, okay, didn't work. I need to schedule more time next time. I need to schedule more time to get this project done. I need to continually reevaluate the way I'm using my time. And finally, we get into social skills. And social skills being, we can look at leadership, we can look at communication, we can look at productivity, we can look at the emotional intelligence. How do we interact with other people? How do we deal with conflict? How do we deal with asserting ourselves? How do we communicate what we need clearly? How do we advocate for ourselves? How do we advocate for others? How do we engage in conversation? How do we make sure that conversation has a balance of personal and professionalism that is appropriate to that relationship? How do we avoid things like crass jokes that might lead to sexual harassment or anything like that? How can we, if that's kind of your way of joking around, how do you move away from that in the professional environment to assure that you don't create a hostile work environment? How do you engage in having a conversation with someone who has power over you, has true authority? How do you engage with that individual? How do you work with people you don't like? How do you, that you don't get along? People have personality. You're not, the test of your skill is not when you're with your friends. It's when you're with your enemies, right? Like, how well can you get along with the people you don't like? I've taken trainings called How to Get Along with Difficult People. Maybe they were taking them about me. I don't know, but I was taking the class, and you come across people who's like, no, this isn't not the person I would choose to work with, but hey, you're not the one choosing, right? So here you are. How do you deal with this? How do you deal with this situation? These are social skills to develop. How, if your natural tendency is shy, how do you act outgoing and do that in a way that you're still taking care of yourself? We have a world that really responds to active participation, and those of us who are shyer, and we tend to not really jump into those social situations. How can we do that and yet still protect ourselves from the fear and those? I have become outgoing. I test as an introvert. My natural tendency, my places that I get energy are when I'm alone, when I'm isolated, when I'm just working on projects of my own. Those are very invigorating for me. Look at me, I'm sitting in this room all alone, flipping out about this stuff. So very, very, very exciting for me to do that kind of work. Yet I force myself to engage with other people, and I act the role of the outgoing individual to the point that it's more natural now, and I probably, in terms of my work life, am truly extroverted. Whereas in my more private life and where I get my energy, I'm very introverted. But that was because of practice, doing that kind of thing. And how do you do that and still protect yourself? Okay, so we've made our way through all of these different things, and we come to the assessment. And it's simply, you're going to be writing a paper. The paper is going to constitute of a title page. Make sure everything you submit to me has a title page on it. Just good practice for every single, unless I specifically say There's no title page. Always put a title page. And it's going to have 3 sections. The first one is going to look at all those learning skills, and you're going to describe your skills and deficits for all of them. Not just learning skills, you describe each one of them. The same for literacy skills, and the same for life skills. And that is it. That's what I'm expecting you to do. So look, you're looking at all those areas, writing a paper. There's a discussion also to talk about these things, so make sure you get into that as well. But the major assignment is this paper. So enjoy this exploration of the skill set that you have and the skill set that you want to develop in all of these areas to enhance your ability to work in the modern workplace. I will see you on the discussion boards.